Hold up.
Even my phone notifies me.
Right. All right. Welcome everyone to the live stream. I know not everyone's going to be immediately joining, so I'm just gonna wait around just a little bit to get a couple of viewers on, and then we'll get right into it. I want to preface this live stream with an introduction to exactly what we're going to be doing. Now, for one, you might be noticing that I'm actually using the Unreal Engine project that I used for my previous tutorial series that I'm going to plan to continue, and that is the game, quote unquote. So I'm using that project just as something to use, since most people watching this probably already have that project made and can just learn basic blueprint and functionalities based off of what I show them in that project, and they can even follow me along if you would like to. So I'll give you guys some time to start up your project now or create a new one or whatever you may need to do. Of course, none of this is going to be game-changing to your project. It's just going to be game-changing to your knowledge and the way you approach programming in Blueprints, and also game creation in general in the Unreal Engine 4 engine. I'm going to, I've created an outline for this, so this is going to be a lot more organized, a lot more structured, but it's not going to feel like that too much. Then, of course, you'll just keep going with the basics that that I'm going to be teaching, because I don't want it to feel structured. I want it to just be structured on my end, not on yours. I want you guys to feel a little more freedom than what I may be giving myself. All right, let me mute those notifications. All right, so didn't want to do that. Anyways, so let's get right into this. First thing we're going to be covering, and this is all about blueprint basics, so the first thing we're going to be covering is some terms. Now, you're going to be needing to know about 6 terms on average that are going to be the most common. There's a lot of other common terms, but these are more for the programming side of things than they are the general engine knowledge. If you want to learn general engine knowledge, I did about 2 episodes on that in Blueprints for Beginners or Unreal Engine for Beginners. It was an old episode I did sometime last year, which honestly isn't that long ago, but it was like in October or something. So if you want to go look at those, you can learn more about the engine's interface than the actual programming side of it. But this is more for the programming, of course. So what we're going to run over is variables, nodes, execution lines, pins, functions, and blueprints. Now, some of those may sound a little foreign, and you may actually know what some of these are. So just, of course, you know, if you're watching this after the fact, skip around. If you want to come back to this later, it's cool too, because this will be up somewhere. I don't know where I'm uploading this to yet. This might be up on YouTube later. But I'm going to get right into it and just create a demo blueprint. Now, let me create a new folder called random, and I will get into the reason for all the folders here later in the tutorial. Okay, so this is a blueprint. A blueprint is anything that you create as a blueprint class. A blueprint class can be something that is an animation, is technically a blueprint class. An animation notify, an animation modifier, an actor, anything under an actor. That would be anything from your character to your camera to your HUD to the landscape to the pawns. Anything is an actor, anything that is an actor, to the save games, the texture. A lot of things are blueprints. So blueprints is a pretty common term and a very broad umbrella term for a script of code or a class. Now, of course, this is visual scripting, so you're not going to be doing any real hardcore typing of code lines. Real quick, I do want to introduce, and to some of you maybe even reintroduce, my good friend and an associate, Nick Rod, on the Discords right now. and he's just going to be helping me out with anything that I may forget or pass up, or anything that you guys have question-wise in the chat. So, like I said, blueprints, super broad example, but super broad term, but you can narrow that down to what kind of blueprint it is. Well, I made an actor. What kind of actor? Actually, it's not any kind of actor. It is just an actor. The type of actor is an example. Why? Because I called it example. So if I wanted to make a child of this, I could actually go in. Now this is slightly advanced, but I could go in and I could make an example blueprint. So I could do that, and I could do an example of an example, and an example of an example, and I could keep going and make children of children of children, all being parents of this, being parents of an actor, being parent of a blueprint object. So there's a lot to go into, but really right now all you need to know is that this is a blueprint. Now you can double click this to open this up, and most people are going to see one of two screens if it pops up on the right monitor. You're either going to see this screen, which is most common if you're making a blueprint, and what you're going to be using if you're creating a blueprint that uses the visual scripting and isn't a child of a C++ class, you're probably going to be using this kind of an editor. But it may show up a little bit different in the term of... No, that's a bad example because that doesn't show up that way either. Let's see. Will it show up like... Will this show up the way I want it to display? No, it's not gonna show up. I can't show, but it'll show up different. But you'll see this blue wording that says "Open in" or "Edit in Full Blueprint Editor," and that's what you're gonna want to click to get this view here. Now, first of all, let's go over variables, since that's really the first term that I went over. I did blueprints is the last term I wanted to go over, but since we kind of created that first, I thought I'd touch on that initially. So let's go over variables. Variables are something that you store data. They are something that are a yes, a no, a 1, 2, 3, 4, a string of text. They are something, they are a container of data. That's a variable. That's the definition of a variable. Something that contains data. Now, variables can be multiple things. They can have a name. They can also be public or private, editable or non-editable outside of. They can also be public, private, or protected. That's something you'll definitely dive into once you do a C++ thing. And last but not least, they can be many different kinds of variables. It can be a boolean, a byte, an integer, a float, a string, a name, a text, a vector, a rotator, transform, or a structure of many different kinds, an enumerator of many different kinds, a type of many different kinds, and even an interface of many different kinds. Options are endless as long as, of course, your mind and your creation allows you to go that far, and as long as the engine allows you to go that far. Now, when you actually get into the blueprint editing, you'll run into something that's this little tiny box. Some aren't so little, like for example a spawn actor from class. It's not as little as these guys, but it's still not too large. Now, some may be really large if you have a giant structure. I could show you that, but that's in a completely different project. But what I will say is that you definitely want to have a constant remembrance and constant knowledge of where everything is, because these nodes are going to get very messy. But nodes are what your blueprints consist of. So the nodes are have these little things called pins on them. Now, I touched on this earlier. I said we're going to be going over nodes, execution lines, pins, functions, blueprints, and variables. The pins are these little things. That's a pin. This is also technically a pin, but it is also an execution line. So you can do a couple things with these. Now, let's say on begin play, we'll just do a test. We want to create a new node. Now, this node has 4 different pins. It's got an execution line in, 2 execution lines out, and it has 1 execution line, actually a pin line in that is a bool variable or a bool type. And that's the condition there. So what you want to do is take your little variable that you made and get test. Get test is the name of the variable. If I dragged this in, then it would say, if I dragged in default root scene, it would say get default root scene. It's going to say get or set and then name of your variable. So test is a bool. So if I wanted to drag it onto the execution line, it wouldn't let me do that because they are not compatible types. But if I wanted to drag it onto the node or the pin that is the bool type, then bool is compatible with bool. Now you may be asking yourself, okay, what if there's something that is, I saw multiple kinds of numbers here. Because maybe you know that an integer, a byte, and a float can all be numbers, and you can even have numbers in a name and a string, and a text. You can have numbers in all of those. You can have numbers in a vector, a rotator, and a transform. What if you wanted to do that? Now, we'll touch into that later, but there is conversions, I'll assure you. So don't worry about the conversions. We'll touch on that in episode 2. But you just right now need to know that these are nodes, these are pin lines, these are pins, and this is an execution line. Those are terminologies that you'll see people who know what they're talking about in blueprints. Those are terminologies that you're going to hear them use. So I use those, and other programmers that use Blueprint use those. So when you hear those, I don't want you to be confused saying, wait, what's this? I haven't learned this yet. Don't be scared, because A, now you know, and B, it's common knowledge, so it's important for you to know. So, the last thing I really want to cover is functions. Functions are kind of like a variable in the sense that they can store data, but they can also do things. A variable really just stores the data, and it passes it from, it stores the data, its data can change, its data can be pulled and referenced, it's just data. But not only can a function hold data, but it can do things and execute things. So let's make a new function called say hi. Now, I really want to do not a whole lot in this because we're not here to set up a whole bunch of fancy stuff in here. But a function can do pretty much anything that a normal Blueprint scheme can do, except it doesn't have events because the event is the function, so you don't really have events in here. If I typed event begin play, it's not going to be in there. Now you can bind to events, but it's not too useful because you can't create a custom event. You can't create a custom event. You can unbind events, blah blah blah, all that stuff that you may need to do through a function. But functions, they hold variables. So to create a variable in a function, you just need to add a new parameter, and that can be a bool. It can be anything that a normal variable can be. So it holds variables. A function holds a variable and uses this variable. And it can also send out this variable. So I want an output, and I want it to output this. So I don't actually want it to say this. I want it to say, I want it to say a string. I want this to also be a string. Now what I want to do is I want to, in the game, print something. I want to print a string. Now, I want whatever is put into here, I want the execution line to go to the print string, I want the pin and the pin line to go to the print string, and then I want it to say whatever is being inputted. Now we're not going to type anything in, we'll make this very simple for now. But then once this is done, I also want it to say done. So let's go over to our event, or event graph, and let's just grab our function, say hi, and now you can see it says new parameter. Now I want to do something different. I don't want it to say new parameter. I want it to say words, because why not? I'm too lazy. Now it says words. Now we can do a lot of things. We can just do hi, but we also could do plenty of different other things with that. It doesn't have to be text. It could be, and by the way, double-clicking on your function opens up the function. It could be completely different. It could be a whole set of line of code. It could be setting variables. It could be creating variables. It could be messing with the UI. It could be changing speed values, run speed values, walk speed values, anything. It could do plenty of stuff. But right now, ours just says hi. But then we've got this little output. Well, I don't want it to say new param1. I want it to say output. So rename it to output. And technically, what we're filling out here are just variables that a bigger C++ script has been created to say, okay, make this variable editable in the engine, and you're just creating a variable to name another variable. It's really variable inception, but we won't get into that. And kudos to anyone who gets that joke. So now we want this output to print another string. Now, we could just we could just say print string, sure, but we already have a function that prints a string for us. So just drag that in and drag the output to the new param. Now this says new param and new param1, but I thought we changed this. Well, one main thing that we need to do that is common knowledge is compile if things don't look right or if things are giving you errors. Now, of course, if you compile and you get an error, then you need to do something different. Now, what would you need to do? Well, first of all, if it's erroring you, you can refresh the node. Ah, there we go. Now it looks right. But sometimes refreshing the node won't do it. So sometimes you have to compile, refresh, compile. It depends on the order that you do it in. But usually doing a compile and a refresh in either order will figure it out, or we'll sort it out. Now, we input hi, our output is done, and we input done into our we output done into our input, and so we can keep this infinite loop going on forever. And we don't really need that anymore. So we're using all of our skills that we've learned, or all of our terminologies that we've learned so far, and even some of your Blueprint skills that I'm sure you've learned in other places. You're learning a real-world application, because this could turn into a whole nother mess, like, I don't know. It could turn a whole nother mess like this. Now, this isn't that much of a mess. I've seen blueprints that are a mess. I've made blueprints that are a mess, trust me. But something we're going to get into that's common knowledge, because our next section that we're going to cover in this episode, in this stream, is common knowledge. But we're going to get into organization, but we're not touching that right now. So if I dragged this, not that, if I dragged random into the example world, and now it's got no mesh, we're not talking about any of those stuff right now, you would see done and hi. Now, it actually did it in the wrong order. It said done on the top and hi on the bottom. But I'm going to answer that real quick for you. The reason that it does that is because it pushes the latest and newest string to be printed to the top. So it actually did it in the right order, but visually how we read, it did it in the wrong order. So just keep that in mind. That the oldest is on the bottom, the oldest print string is on the bottom, and the newest print string is on top. You think I'm missing anything here, Nick?
I don't know. No. You can continue.
Okay,
you can
sweet.
Go on.
Right, so now let's move on to common knowledge. Common knowledge can be categorized, or can be also phrased as two other things. Can be good tricks, or, you know, just life hacks for programmers, if you will. So that's another way to put it. But common knowledge for Unreal Engine, and pretty much for any programmer, number one, absolute number one, is be organized. If you're not organized and you go through some code, if you go through some code that is a complete spaghetti mess, because let's be honest, these little lines, they look like spaghetti, and if you have a billion of them all over and they're going everywhere, it's going to be a mess of spaghetti, trust me. So be organized. So take the time to go through, press C to comment things, and this is my begin play. And I'm going to need to know where that's at. This is my tick. I'm going to need to know where that's at. And stuff like that. This starts the AI. I'm going to need to know stuff. So that way, whenever I go in So that way whenever I go in and I'm zoomed all the way out, I can kind of make out what's going on here. But if I zoom in and say, I think that might be what it says, yep, it is. It's my begin play. I don't have to necessarily look at the tinier words. I can look at the much bigger, bolder words that are standing out, and I can see the content that is within that comment selection. I believe you can even change the color, the font size. So if you want some really gnarly font size, you know what? Have at it, because to each their own. Because I mean, come on, who doesn't want an insane font size for stupid things that start the AI? You can even do the bubble and a whole bunch of other stuff. It doesn't really matter. You can have it as organized and customized as you want for within the blueprints. The other thing that goes along with organized is keep a naming convention. I'm terrible at... Good lord, it just crashed. I'm terrible at this, but something that you absolutely should do is keep a naming convention on your C++ classes, and your C++ classes will obviously affect both the constructor and the header file. Keep a naming convention on your animation blueprints, on your blueprints like your actors and all that stuff. Keep a naming convention on your meshes, a naming convention on your whether they're static or skeletal meshes. Keep a naming convention on everything that you can possibly keep a naming convention on, and remember that. Keep notes about it if you need to, and you will never ever regret it, because unless it's a really small project, then I'll give you a break. You don't need to do the naming convention much. But if it's a big project, you'll never regret it, because you will know where everything is. You'll know exactly what to look for, the prefix, the suffix, however you decide to do that naming convention that either you come up with or that you find on Google, whatever. But speaking of Google, another very good tooltip and a life hack for pretty much anything, let's be honest, Google is your best friend. And that's just because there's so many tutorials out there, like me, Virtus Learning Hub, plenty of other people. This isn't like sponsored by Hammer or anything, or I didn't get paid to say that. I'm just naming off other people that I know off the top of my head, and I don't know many people. I don't even watch other people. I just know of them. Like Virtus Learning Hub and plenty of other YouTubers, and Tesla. I think UE4 Tesla or whatever. Those are great resources, whether it's forums, blogs, shooter game examples, stuff like that. That forum, it's a great resource. Google is your best friend, or plenty of other search engines, but sometimes Google's not trustable because ads or whatever, right? But speaking of your best friend, UE4 Docs is your next best friend. The documentation, if you don't know how to get there, this flashing little graduation hat, or whatever you want to call it, this flashing little hat over here, the best and easiest way to get to the... Oh, good lord. This is going to send me through the tutorial. This is going to send you through the tutorial. But it should... Oh, it's F12, I think? If you hit F12, and I don't want to do that because it'll stop my thing. But if you just go to Help, Online, and then Forums... let me drag this to a new window. Oh, not the forums. I wanted the documentation. If you go to actual... document resources and documentation, this is a great place. It'll teach you C++, how to use the classes. It'll teach you blueprints, how to do that, how to use the nodes, what goes where. It'll teach you plenty of good stuff, but it's not going to be too in-depth, and sometimes it's fairly outdated. So it's not always the best place to go, but it's usually better for C++ users. But sometimes you can find decently good stuff. Also anywhere on the community, like the blog, the forums, Answer Hub, stuff like that, right? Now, another good tip that you're going to want to use is keeping things simple. If you can make something as simple as possible, you're not going to do 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. No, you're going to do 1 times 5, or 1 times 6, however many ones I did. You're going to do that. You're going to do the easiest way, right? So keep things simple. Keep things usable, simple, and to the point. Don't go a long way about it just because it's the only way you know how. Figure out a new way, and it'll make your life easier. It may be hard to learn the new way, but it'll save you time in the long run because you'll have found a quicker way to do it just from that 1 hour or 2 or day or 2 or a week or 2 of learning how to do it the easier way. You thus save yourself time when you have to do it again in the future. So keep things simple, right? Also, another thing, if you've got a bad computer, Control-Shift-S is your best friend. You go in, you do all this work and you don't save, or you turn off the autosave and you don't save, Control-Shift-S will save everything that you've edited. So if you see that little star up in the corner, which I don't currently have, but now I do, you can either Control-S to only save this document or Control-Shift-S to save everything. And sometimes, depending on how much stuff you've changed, it'll take a while to save. But it's worth it, right? Let's just hope it doesn't save or crash while saving, am I right? And while we're on the topic of saving, why don't we go and cover the fact that you can save on compile. And the way you do that is you go down this little drop-down menu arrow and save on compile only on success. You can even do always, just if you're that cautious and do a lot of work, big chunks of work that tend to fail. That's fine. Then save always. But save on compile, and then if you don't want to go through and compile every single script that you've been editing, super quick life hack, go in, hit play, compiles all the scripts for you. Last but not least, this is something that I learned very recently, and I felt very stupid for not knowing, but this is for multiple reasons. For optimization, just how the engine is designed, and how it's programmed, and how materials are designed and programmed. Don't use the material. Don't use the original material. Use an instance. So if you've got a material, here, right, you could use this material, and Unreal Engine even does this. Seriously, they do. But for better optimization, if you're having some optimization issues, right-click the material and create a material instance, and it'll even do the instance naming convention for you. Or some people like to do mi and not do the _inst at the end, and they do mi instead of im. But I think I like the inst better because im and mi can look very same, especially if you've got bad vision like me. So do that, because it'll do instances of the material, so that way it doesn't have to call the same material over and over and over again and lag out your game. It just instances the material. A lot of lag saved. You're welcome. But right now, that's pretty much all that I have. One other thing to be organized, by the way, is be organized with your folders. Don't just do a blueprints folder and then throw all your blueprints in the head blueprints folder. Organize it into AI, and then is it friendly AI? Just use all the folders you need to. Unreal Engine isn't gonna get mad at you, I'm sure, unless you have like 1,000 inside. Excuse me, 1,000 inside of 1,000 inside of 1,000 folders, which I doubt no one's ever gonna do. But if you've got too many folders, then it might scream at you and crash. But trust me, you can almost never go overboard with your folders. Be organized, that way you can find things, and that way things are easier for other people. If you're working on a group project, it's easier for other people to find, and it just makes your life easier, so that way you don't have to wade through this giant mess of a whole bunch of files just strewn everywhere. Trust me, I've been through that mess before, and it isn't fun, and it doesn't work very well. Anyways, I'd like to thank everyone for joining me for this real quick 30-minute live stream. I didn't expect it to be this quick, but apparently the coffee did something, so thank you, Starbucks. Not spawn. Hop in the Discord server in the bottom if you guys would like to collaborate with other game developers, meet really great people, and talk with me on a more one-to-one basis, because I'm cool with PMing if you PM me on Discord. So Discord link in the description. I'll probably do some gaming live streams later today, maybe not, and I'll try and do another curated episode, I should say, of Blueprint Basics and Unreal Engine Basics, yeah, I can speak, Unreal Engine Basics in the next episode, and we'll cover some more in-depth things that are still basics and common knowledge, but are a little higher up on that tier. So this will be up and edited, actually probably not edited because of how short this video was and how quick and concise I got all this done. I didn't really talk to chat, I didn't really do too much of that stuff. So anyways, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, like, subscribe, and of course comment what I should have done better and what I did wrong, and maybe if I forgot something, or if I stated a false fact. In that case, it wouldn't be a fact, it would just be a fallacy. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.